These are two people that I've gotten to know a little bit over the past few months. They came to our marriage conference. They're friends with Alika and a bunch of those guys, and Mike Fiore up here. Just good people. You know, it's hard when you're married and one person's struggling in addiction with drugs and alcohol. Imagine the odds when two people are struggling with drugs and alcohol in a marriage. Imagine the odds of that, of surviving that, right? Staying alive for one thing, but managing to keep your marriage alive. But again, that's what God can do. So without further ado, would you guys please give a warm welcome to Kurt and Diana. There you go. All right. There's some tissues for you especially, all right?
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, good. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Being up on stage is like, a little overwhelming. I'm good with being like down off the stage, but I'm going to share a little bit, and then my husband's going to share after me, and I'm going to just share a little bit about what my life was like and what it's like now, and hopefully you guys hear, some hope and strength through that. So yeah, my childhood, like most people's, was, toxic. I think most addicts or alcoholics grow up in toxic households. Not everybody, but my dad was an alcoholic, and I didn't really know he was an alcoholic, until I got older. He drank a lot. He was abusive towards my mom and my older brother. And my mom and dad constantly fought, argued, so that's really what I grew up with and thought was normal. So I brought that with me throughout my relationships. And I would say probably when I was 8, that was the most traumatic time with my mom and dad. So on December 28th, my mom and dad went out to dinner with 2 friends, and when they came back, for some reason, my dad had choked my mom until she was blue in the face, and she got up and got out of the room and went to go call 911, but she couldn't catch her breath. She couldn't breathe. So my older brother and sister were still awake, and they came out and they called 911. My dad closed the door and shot himself. And so, I've hated Christmas ever since. I don't know why it's doing that. I've hated Christmas ever since that time, and I just hear it echoing. Is it echoing for anybody else? Okay. So that, I heard my mom in that time. I woke up as an 8-year-old little girl, hearing my mom kicking the cabinets, which was against my wall. And I could hear the cops, radio, and hear her saying, bring him back, bring him back. And I thought just my dad was out at the bar, like he had always been. So I went back to sleep, and my mom came in and woke me up and told me my dad had passed away. And then not long after that, a couple months, my mom had moved in the guy that they went out to dinner with into our house. And not long after that, he started molesting me. And I got up enough courage, because I knew something was off about that. I just wasn't sure what. So I had told my mom that he was doing that. And the next day, she woke him up and had me talk with him. And he denied it. And then she made me hug him. And then it continued. So I didn't know then that my mom didn't believe me, but she didn't. And she had told me after he left her that she didn't believe me and she was sorry. And I don't blame my mom for all this stuff that's going on, because I don't know what I would do if I had 4 children and my husband had just committed suicide, and I don't know what that would look like, but I know she did the best she could with what she had. However, that just made me super angry. I turned into a really angry child, and she moved us back up to Pennsylvania. We were living in Florida at the time, to be more around family, which was, she was doing the best she could. And with her and my grandparents, they put me and my little brother into a private school. And that's where I first, we had always gone to church, but that's where I first really had said that prayer, asked Jesus to come into my heart, and I meant it at that time. I just didn't know what to do with all this anger that was built inside of me. I didn't know how to express it. I didn't know how to work through it, and I didn't have somebody teaching me how to do those things. So as time went on, I was looking for love. I just wanted to be loved and heard and accepted and not feel this pain that I felt inside of me. So eventually, when I was 15, I started cutting myself to relieve the physical pain. I could see the cut, I could feel it, and it didn't hurt anymore inside. Like for that little bit of time, it just didn't hurt anymore. And I didn't do it all the time, but I did it, sometimes. And then I was also looking for somebody else to love me. And I found this guy who was a party guy. He was, the life of the party. Everybody just had fun around him, and kind of just clung on to him, hoping that he'll fill this void. And throughout this time, I told my mom, like, I don't want to go to this private school anymore. So she put me in a public school, and I just, kind of grew further and further away from Christ. And, having him lead my life, I still didn't know how to do all of that. And I went to the public school, started dating this guy, got into drugs, started smoking and drinking, how we do when we first start out. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. I don't ever not want to be without this, because it just relieves me. I don't feel that pain anymore. But as so many of you know, that eventually goes away, that covering up that pain, because it just turns into more and more pain. I had gotten pregnant when I was 18, and I had a miscarriage. I'm being cheated on, and I'm cheating, and eventually the drugs turned into harder drugs, and I started, shooting heroin. And once I got to that point, I was like, okay, this is crossing the line now. I need to get away from this and stop doing this, because it's not helping my life. So I had the bright idea of getting on methadone with my ex and trying to save him in the process of not knowing what I'm doing. And so we both got on methadone, and that lasted a little bit. It was a crutch, but I had never been to a program. I had never tried reaching for help. I would definitely not suggest anybody getting on methadone if you have not tried every other option, because before is when I was able to put it down. I wasn't sick. I wasn't physically dependent on the heroin at this point, even though I was shooting it. And when I got on methadone, I was taking that, and that was in my system every single day for 3 years. I was on it. They had put me up to like 100 milligrams, and I started working as a dancer, and I was going to school, and so I was doing this just cycle of waking up every day, going to the clinic, coming home, going to school. I was in college. After college, coming home, taking a nap, getting up, getting ready, going to work, working from until 4 o'clock in the morning, and then doing it all over again. And one day, I fell asleep behind the wheel coming back from the clinic, and I almost killed 2 cops. I had fell asleep, and I was going to the left side. They were pulled over on the left side for some reason, and I heard the rumble strips, and it woke me up, and I pulled over immediately because I knew they were coming. They had tried to charge me with a DUI, but the only thing I had in my system was the methadone at that time, so the judge dismissed my case, thankfully, because you can still get a DUI on methadone, because I was over-medicated. And at that point, I had told them, I said, take me off this. This is too much. And they were like, no, we can't. You have to detox off of it. So I did. It took me 1.5 years to detox off of it. I was coming down 2 milligrams every other week. And then once I got off of that, I got really sick. I couldn't function without anything else, so I started drinking heavily. And I just had this vicious cycle of using a different drug every time, trying to come off of another. Eventually, I left my ex, and I was still drinking, and I had met my now husband in between one of our breakups, and we happened to run into each other again, and we started talking, and he was using at this point. We started using together. I went back on heroin and did that for a while until it turned into fentanyl, and then we were on fentanyl for, I don't know, about 8 years. We just kept switching drugs. We were trying, we thought if you could remove the drugs, it would change your life. And while some of that is true, that's not all that it is. After, I don't know how long it was, we played this song and dance of, when he would go to jail and want to come home and try to be clean and sober and stay sober because he was sober, I was using. So it just doesn't work when you have one person that's clean and one person that's using. When I went to jail, I had gone to jail for 90 days. I had crashed a car and ran from the cops and lied to them, and it took about 3 years for it to catch up, but it did. And I went to jail for 90 days, and I swore, I was like, oh, I'm never gonna do drugs again. Now that the drug is gone, I'm just never gonna do it again. And when I came home, he was using, and it was a matter of like 2 days, I think, before I was back at it. And I can remember like talking to my mom before she had passed, and I was like, I just don't understand how people are happy, just genuinely happy. Like they're not miserable. They don't wake up every day wishing they would die. Like, I just don't understand how anybody has that in them. And my mom had this friend, her name's McGee, and she was one of those people who was just, it didn't matter what was thrown at her way. She was just happy, and she just enjoyed life. And I mean, the worst thing could be going on, but she would still have that joy inside of her, and it radiated. And I was just like, I just don't understand it. And when I was talking to my mom, she was like, she didn't understand it either, because she didn't ever have that, that freedom, I guess. Even though I know my mom believed in God and had Jesus as her savior, for some reason she just could never find that complete joy. And I think a lot of that had to do with the things that had happened with me growing up and just our family. So eventually, what was it? Was it 2021? I don't know. My mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in January and had told us. So I didn't know how much longer she had, but I knew she didn't have that much longer. And she was in Florida at the time, so I was going back and forth to Florida. And at first, I didn't know how I was going to manage my addiction without, having my drugs. I didn't know how I was going to go down and see her and be able to just be with her without being sick. So I eventually figured out how to fly down there with my drugs. So everything just at this point is revolved around drugs. Like, how am I going to live my life? I was working, we had a house, we had dogs that we were taking care of, but everything revolved around making sure I was still well enough to function and be able to do these chores. And that's what they felt like, chores. And so we actually went down and saw my mom. He flew in for a weekend. We decided to get married because, I had lost my dad, and I wanted one of my parents to see us get married. We had been together, I don't know, like 10 years or something like that, so it was long overdue. And we had a little wedding before my mom passed at my mom's friend's house. It was just a small ceremony. Unfortunately, none of his family was there, so that was a little sad. And we have to have another wedding, which will be fine. But he asked me, like, before my mom passed away, like, what do you wish would happen? And I said, I just wish my mom would be able to see me be married. So we did that. And we brought my mom back up to the north, and she passed away in June. And then after that, it just spiraled. We were doing more drugs than ever, and I remember just sitting there like, there has to be more to this life than this. Like, I know I have a job, which I'm grateful for, and I know we have a roof over our head and we have food to eat, but like, there is no way that we're brought into this earth just to exist like this and like feel this pain. And and I knew like I said, I knew I believed in God. I had asked Jesus into my heart when I was 12, but I still just didn't know. I didn't understand that you have to go to him too in order for him to heal you. And eventually my husband came to me and he said, I think I'm ready to go to rehab. So I was like, thank God, finally we're able to do this. And we made arrangements and we ended up in detox together. We went through detox together, and then we did, when we went to detox, I said, oh, I'm just going for a week. I'm going for a week, and then I'm going back to my job, because my job is so important to me. Like, how are they gonna survive a week without me? You know what I mean? And same for him. I was like, well, you're a little worse off than me, so you can go for 2. And I'd never been to rehab before, so I had no idea. So I went, and I kind of went with an open mind, but I still had that, like, we're gonna do it my way. This is how this is gonna go. And we got there, and after a week of being in there, I was like, I can't even imagine going back home at this point. Like, I'm still sick. Like, this is crazy. And he was still very sick too. We went through Radar, which is in San Diego, and when we had gotten out, we landed at Zoe, which is right in Lake Forest, and we were probably like 23 or 24 days sober, and my poor husband here could barely even form a sentence, and it was like actually kind of scary, because I remember being, at one point I was like, oh my gosh, he can't talk. Like, his jaw's like, he just can't form a sentence well. Like, is he gonna be stuck like this forever? I was terrified, you know? But yeah, so we went through the PHP and IOP program, and I met some awesome people, and that whole, like, I have to go back to work thing went right out the window. I didn't even care anymore. I was just glad to find people that cared, find people that wanted to pour into us, find people that were like, hey, like, you know, inviting us to do things. I was laughing again for the first time in my life, and since I was probably a little girl, like a genuine laugh. And I was like, I want this so bad. So I got a sponsor, and I started working the steps, and I didn't understand at that time that an addiction is just like, you're spiritually broken, you know? I didn't understand that you had to fix your spiritual connection in order to heal. And once I started seeing God move, and like these things that are called God shots, once I started seeing those, I was like, wow, this is real. Like, I've always known God existed, and I've always believed that Jesus came and died on the cross for our sins, but I never felt it in the way that I've now felt it. And when we were in PHP and IOP, we had talked about moving out here, and because we made a mess of our lives back home, and we were like, we can't go back home and do that. Like, I mean, we can, but it's gonna be really, really hard. And we had made some really good connections here. So we were both praying about it. I had said, God, if this is where we're supposed to be, like, let this happen. Like, let us find a place to live where we can bring our dogs and his dad. And before we got out of IOP, we found an apartment in Costa Mesa, and we signed the lease, and I was like, thank God. And when we went back home, I was even more grateful, because I didn't stay sober. I picked up again. I wasn't calling my sponsor. I wasn't reading my Bible. I wasn't staying connected. I went to a couple meetings, but I was missing just that connection with people. I didn't have the same connection back home as I do here. And so his boss was like really trying to get him to stay, and like offered him way more money and told him a 4-day work week, and he was like contemplating it. He was like, well, we can have a house here and we can go back there. And I was like, no, that doesn't sound like a good idea, especially because we had already drank, you know, and well, I had already drank. And then I was like, no, I put my foot down. I said, I don't care what you do. You can do you, but I'm going back, and that's what I'm doing. So thankfully, he agreed, and we drove back, and we just really dug back in. I got a different sponsor, and I would say the biggest thing, honestly, for me is is that connection with God. Every day I wake up and pray. Every night we pray together. We try to make God like the center. And if you're working the steps, if you work at AA program, we were just kind of talking about this earlier, but the third step is super important because when I try to run my life, it's a mess. It's a disaster. I feel so empty and I'm so hurt and I just feel so overwhelmed. I'm worried about money. I'm worried about what he's doing. I'm worried about what everybody else is doing instead of just focusing on, other people, serving other people, and my connection with God. And as soon as I started doing that and I started really turning my will over, like God just moves. Like today I'm a part of a podcast. It's Recovery Principles and Recovery Disciplines. It's RPRD podcast, which is something crazy. I thought like me? Why me? Like I don't have enough time sober. I don't have the answers, but I'm a part of this group and if I'm able to help one person, then I'm doing something good, God's using me and I see that God's using me and he's gonna continue to use me and us together. I'm also, part of nonprofit and I just have these connections and I just been seeing God move. Like we went to, Saturday, we went to a beach meeting in Huntington Beach and man, just to see the people that joined us and then circled up and prayed with us, I was like, holy cow, this is crazy. Like, it's awesome to see God moving, and using people and being a part of that. It just feels good. Like when I get out of my own head and my own way, big things happen and I just enjoy watching it and I enjoy being a part of it. And it's so much more fulfilling than my sad little self-pity life of like, oh, woe is me, all this bad stuff happened to me. But it, like they say, it didn't happen to me, it happened for me. So that hopefully somebody can hear my story and hear what I've been through and see that you can get through it and you can go to the other side and Jesus does save. And it's crazy because I never thought like, why? Just even thinking like God sent his son to die on the cross just for me. I mean, not just for me, but for you guys too, but for you. You know what I mean? Like it's insane to think that, but he did. And to build that relationship, you have to meet him too. You have to ask for that relationship and you have to participate. It can't just be a one-sided he gives. And I'm so grateful that somehow through all of this, I learned that because now I do have that relationship and I can go to him and say, hey, I can't do this. You can just take this and lay it at his feet. And that's what I do every day now. So thanks for letting me share.
I guess I'm going to this side now. I don't know how I'm going to follow that, but so here we go. My name's Kurt, alcoholic, addict. I work a 12-step program called Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. And I work Alcoholics Anonymous, but my DOC would be Fetty. And so I guess I could start off. I was born in Chester, Pennsylvania. Where do we even go with this? Okay, I got it. Yeah, so there's a bunch of trauma in my life. There's a bunch of chaos. So the first house I remember living in, we had already moved once, was in a place called Norwood, Pennsylvania, Delaware County. And I had the Amtrak high-speed line in the backyard, so it gives you an idea. The line that runs between Maine and Florida. It's a train, and that household, so my father was involved in a few things. He had his hands dirty and got caught with 2, potentially 3 pounds. I don't know the logistics behind the story. And around that time, that's the first time I ever drank alcohol because there was always tons of alcohol, and that's what everyone did in that house. It's the first time alcohol hit my lips. I don't know if I got drunk or not, but I know that from that point forward, parents got divorced when I was like 3.5. So there was that. I lost 2 of my grandparents that year, both of my dad's parents. So there was a lot of chaos. My mom moved me to my grandmother's house with my sister and my grandmother. And so I say all this, and there was a bunch of love in my house. Like I can't get away from that fact. There was a bunch of love. My family isn't the largest family, but there's definitely a lot of love. And so I get moved out to a different location yet again, and then my mom eventually meets a new guy, and she moves me out to Chester County, Pennsylvania. She puts me in one of the best schools in Pennsylvania, like elementary schools, I should say, which then goes into the same high school she spoke on. So my stepdad, there was a bunch of stability first time I ever had stability in my life. We eat dinner at a dinner table every night, and that's not the life I was used to living prior to that. But in that household, I experienced sexual trauma from 2 different people. And at that point, I looked up to all the wrong things. Like, I can remember my cousins coming up, my uncle coming up from Florida in the bombed out Cadillacs, And that's the lifestyle that I lived. Like, everybody that I called uncle wasn't really my family. It's just the way it was. And, I would say that at that point, like 8 to 10 years old, not only did I pledge that I wasn't gonna get into a relationship with anybody because I had all my my walls up, my boundaries set, but at the same time, I pledged that I was gonna have everything I wanted in life. Like, I was gonna get it on my own way. And I was really good at playing both sides. So like I said, there was a bunch of stability, but every weekend I'd be going to my dad's, and it was basically a free-for-all. So my dad ended up getting a settlement and started to buy up rental properties, right? And say I'm about 13 years old, and he's got the rental properties, we're rehabbing rental properties. I get into the collision industry, which is what I still do today. So it was a very action-packed life. I always say it like this: fast cars, fast women, and fast money is the lifestyle that I lived. And I basically had my hands dirty, so I would say the first time I smoked weed, I'd say with my dad, was at the Philadelphia Folk Festival, and I was probably 12 years old. But at that point, I had already had my hands dirty, and that wasn't the first time I smoked weed, but that's the first time I smoked with my pop. And that's just what we did. So we all grew up, we were like feral animals, all the kids that ran around. And my dad had the rental property, so we would all crash there. There'd be like 40 of us on the floor, and he'd be like walking through us to get to the bathroom, to use the bathroom. That's like the life that I live. And it's a blessing that I get to stand here, because the only time I went to church was weddings and funerals. That's it. And potentially a holiday, but that was it. Like, the smell of flowers to me meant death. It's that simple. Like, I hated the smell of flowers. So, moving forward through life, I start to get the girls. Girls was a huge vice in my life. Women, because it turns into women. They're not girls no more after a certain point. Women, the money thing, I was very, not money damaged, but I had this need and I wanted it all. Like, I wanted to be in control, right? Control is a big thing for me. And then I start driving, and, by the time I was 18 years old, I had 10 cars, something like that. I haven't had a license in 8 years, and I've had over 35 cars. That just gives you an idea of, like, the lifestyle I was living. So I just kept going. So it started off, smoking, drinking, and then it turned into Coke, and then Percocets, and Oxycontins, the pharmaceuticals, and these things called Opanas. And, at that point, I was probably about 24 years old, but I skipped a little bit. I'm gonna have to go back. At 19, am I echoing? At 19, she was 19, I was 21, sorry about that. Oh man, I'm going back over here. 19, 21? Okay, she's 19, I'm 21, is the first time that we had an encounter with one another. And I was, like I said, I was already, the switch had already went from where, like, I could, like, effectively use drugs to, like, I was full-blown, like, in active addiction. And so we decided that, like, we liked one another, but we were both in committed relationships with other people. I just was in the process of getting out of a 5-year. She was in the process of getting out of an 8-year. And, it was very, very difficult for me to stay clean and sober in any way in my entire life because it was just a lifestyle that I was living, right? Like, you wake up, you get high. You go to sleep, you wake up, you get high. It didn't matter if it was a good day or a bad day. That's just what we did. So I started catching DUIs when I was like, caught my first one at 21. I caught my second one, I think, at 28. But I don't want to go too far ahead here. So 21, I catch my first DUI. 23 years old, I am living in a very large square footage house with an indoor pool, a sauna, and a spa on like 5 acres, koi pond, the whole 9 yards. And I got out of a relationship. I'm kind of like dating her. Maybe 5 other girls at the same. It was bad, bro. Like, I didn't even know where I was. Let's just say that. I didn't know left from right at that point in my life. And I end up knocking this other chick up. Her name is irrelevant, but I get locked up on a $100,000 cash bail for a first-degree felony rape charge, and because I decided that it was smart for me to engage with another woman in her bed, and accusations were made, and I end up getting locked up. So I spent 16 days in jail, and I plea out. That's the first time I was on the chronic substance abuse program, and that's the equivalent of drug court out here, the DUI program, something similar where you call in daily. And yeah, so things just progress at that point. At this point, they gel up all the, what I call like designer drugs, all the opiates, like the pharmaceutical style opiates, and I'd end up down in Kensington, which is probably the worst part of Philadelphia, daily. Like, it wasn't once, twice a day. I would be down in Kensington, a 45-minute car shot, we'd be down there. And yeah, life, like, it was unmanageable, and it kept getting worse. Like, I used if it was good, I used if it was bad, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. So, yeah, I ended up catching my second DUI. I caught my third DUI. I caught my fourth DUI. All in between, I keep bailing out and bailing out. They were all in like a year run. Then I caught possession with intent manufacturing charge. Got caught with 136 bags of dope and 96 Xanax. And then I bailed out on that, and we got a domestic, right? Because your girlfriend called the cops, and they came in and said they were taking one of us. I put my hand up, you can take me. So, yeah, I was on 5 open cases. I ended up fighting all those cases and going into jail, sentenced, because I was using paid lawyers for all of them. Did 6 months on all those charges. Got out, came home, but when I was in jail, she had gotten raped, correct? And went back to some of her old ways. And it was very hard because we were like on the outs when I went away. So I tried to stop doing heroin with meth. We'll get into that. And that's probably the weirdest part of my story. That's when I was probably the most emotionally unstable, and my life got the craziest. I ended up homeless at one point. Suicide plays a role in suicide attempts play a role in my story, but God was just like pushing me back down. Like, you need to stay down there. There's a purpose for you there. And I'm like, oh my God, just take me. You know what I'm saying? And I hated who I was. Like, I did not enjoy the person I became, and I was trapped in a paradigm. Like, I didn't know which way to go, you know? So I get out of jail, like I said, overdose within 2 days. I got some meth and some fentanyl and overdosed again instantly because I had no tolerance built, and ended up going back for another 6 months. And then when I got out of jail that time, I'll say when I was in jail, so I would always have to go on the tour of the counties, right? And the only thing you get to take with you when you go county to county, right, is your Bible. You don't get to take your belongings. You don't get to take anything. And that's the time that I opened up the Bible and started getting back into the Word a little bit. But like, when I come off of drugs, because of how excessively I use, I can't think. So it's just a page of words. But it was doing something for me. So I come out and I find a home church, which was right next to our house. And we did marriage counseling. I would go to church all the time, and I would pray and I would meditate, and I was just consistently asking, like, I was waiting for the change. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but it eventually materialized. And yeah, I mean, so like I said, when I picked up the Bible in jail, like I don't know what it did for me, but it did something. Like, it put me on the trajectory of where I'm standing on a stage here in a church, sharing my message with you guys. So, you know, I came out here. As she said, I couldn't put together a sentence for up to about 60 days after coming down. So I keep mentioning fentanyl, but I also like Xanax, and I take that in excess too. So, yeah, that's where it leads me. I decide that I'm gonna ruin my life, and I'm really good at that. So I came out here, got a sponsor. I wake up, I pray, I meditate, I make calls, even though I don't want to. I try every single day to ask God to remove my character defects. Like, first thing I do in the morning, I come to you humbly. I don't ask him to humble me. I come to you humbly and set my problems at your feet. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I don't want to be humbled anymore. I went through enough of that. Yeah, and, you know, I'm doing step work with my sponsor currently. And she mentioned we've both been approached about being outreach pastors for a nonprofit, or pastors, outreach coordinators. And, you know, I have people calling me like Ann to come and share my testimony, which is an amazing thing, because you definitely didn't want me standing next to you when I was using drugs, because it would have been a problem. And so, besides that, I am thankful and grateful that you guys let me share. Yeah.
Amen. You hold on to that. Man, what a